Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. The country of Russia has the might to put the U.S. in its place. Still propagandizing on behalf of Putin is Medvedev. No surprise there. And it's no surprise that China is doing the same, although more quietly, trying to position itself as a good guy, as we've talked a bit about this week with op-eds in the New York Times suggesting China is an ideal broker for peace and so forth. We'll see how the call between President Biden and President Xi goes today. They're expected to talk. But I don't know where you go when President Xi has declared that Putin is his friend, their friendship has no limits, and China is at present backing the play of Russia. And why not? Beijing wants Russian natural resources at a discount. And it also gives China the opportunity to pay for to buy as much energy and other resources as Putin is willing to sell, and to use the yuan to do so, and advance the notion of the yuan as a global trade currency. So there are definitely some short-term benefits that China has identified. Will they pay long-term costs, particularly if Putin is unsuccessful in conquering Ukraine? For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Ian Williams. He's a former foreign correspondent for BBC, Channel 4 News, and NBC. He's the author of Every Breath You Take, New Tyranny. And Ian Williams joins us now. Ian, thanks for joining us. China's New Tyranny, that is. Ian, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, Dan. Good morning to you.
Morning. So what do you expect President Xi to offer in his conversation with Biden today?
I suspect there'll be the usual platitudes that China respects sovereignty and territorial integrity, and he'll put himself forward as a peacekeeper. I mean, the problem with that is those claims of respect for integrity don't really bear up to much scrutiny historically with China. And I think as long as Xi cannot even bring himself to mutter the word invasion, as long as he can't call an invasion and continues to echo Putin's justifications, saying that the Russian leader has legitimate security concerns that justify this barbarity, I don't see that he can be a credible intermediary, a credible peacekeeper. And I suspect President Biden will tell him that today, that he needs to come off the fence, that he's tying himself in knots. And if he does not be a little bit more forceful with his good friend Putin, then the long-term damage to China could be enormous, not least getting caught up in secondary sanctions if China does support Russia economically.
But if Biden says, you need to come off the fence, I mean, Biden is being more generous than he should be, because we know that President Xi is not on the fence. He's with the Russians. And
that's absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, Dan. He has echoed everything that Putin has said, and to portray himself as a peacekeeper is, it is something of a joke. And I think that Biden needs to make that abundantly clear.
Well, what does Putin want from China?
He wants a cushion, an economic cushion, and according to intelligence reports, he also wants other military supplies. That comes as a bit of a surprise, of course, because China traditionally has been a big purchaser of military items from Russia. They in aircraft, tanks, artillery. But there are more niche items like drones that Russia may be in need of. But fundamentally, it's about economics. It's about cushioning the Russian economy. It was no accident that the very day the invasion was launched, China suddenly decided that Russian wheat was palatable, having banned it because of fears over contamination. They then lifted the ban on the very day the invasion happened. They're pushing ahead with massive energy deals. As you pointed out, the price, no doubt, is pretty good at the moment. And they see it as a way of extending the use of the yuan internationally to part of a longer term project to break the dominance of the dollar. So China sees benefits there. But I think for Russia, the primary benefit is to help cushion against Western sanctions. But of course, China's got to be careful because its banks are vulnerable, its companies are vulnerable, it's much more integrated in the world economy than Russia is, and it could get caught up in secondary sanctions. That Chinese companies could themselves end up being sanctioned as a result of helping Russia. And of course, the Chinese economy is looking pretty wobbly at the moment. Markets have been collapsing. A combination of factors, not least of which is the severe COVID lockdown policies of Xi Jinping.
Yeah, and they've got some pretty aggressive growth targets for this year, too, that don't seem readily achievable. But here's the thing. Do you think that Xi believes that he is too big to sanction because of exactly what you were just describing, China's integration in the world economy, and the United States and the West may be willing to pay a higher price at the pump, but if you start to shut down China and all that is imported from China in the West, then you're really starting to negatively impact your consumers, your citizens in the West, and he's betting that the West won't do that.
I think that is his bet, but I think at the same time that he's been shocked by the severity of the sanctions against Russia and the degree of unity among Western companies. He and Putin share this thing, share a lot of their outlook on history and international affairs. But one thing they do share is this view that the West is in terminal decline, that it's decaying, that their time is up, and that the emergence of this new international order, this axis of Russia and China, is inevitable. And I think they genuinely believe that the response to the invasion of Ukraine would be more muted, that the sanctions would not be as biting and as wide-ranging, and Western democracies would not be unified. And I think that has been a wake-up call for Xi, and there will certainly be those around him who will be saying, look, hang on a second. There have already been reports, for instance, that Chinese companies have refused to export aircraft parts to Russia because they're worried about secondary sanctions that they may incur, that Chinese banks have been reluctant to underwrite various deals for the same reason. And I think you are right. The impact of sanctions on China would be far more profound because they're so integrated in the world economy. But at the same time, I think that the resolve that's been shown by the West, the breadth, the bite, the severity of the sanctions and the unity has come as quite a shock to China as well as Russia.
So is China's position either get this over with and take Ukraine, or come up with some sort of partition deal and get this over with? Is that what they want from Russia?
It's hard to discern what they want at the moment because they seem to be tying themselves in knots. I think we can say without too much doubt that Xi had a broad sense of what Putin had planned, that he was tipped off in that meeting they had before the Olympic Games. The only question is whether he was party to the specifics. Maybe he just preferred not to know. But I think either way, that they were gambling that this would be over with quickly, that Russia's battle-hardened troops would quickly and effectively and ruthlessly roll into Ukraine. Ukraine would fold very quickly. Perhaps they even believed the propaganda that they'd be welcomed on the streets. And I think that this is the worst nightmare at the moment for Beijing. You've got the barbarity on 24-hour news, seemingly open-ended, and anything but decisive. So it's working out in a way that looks very bad, clearly for Putin, but also by association for Xi.
Is there a scenario, an escalation scenario, in which you think China could be drawn into this as a formal partner of Russia, providing more materials overtly, including potentially troops? And I'm thinking, for example, if there was a NATO/US enforced no-fly zone, or if that's not far enough, if it would require a bigger trigger, then what if Putin was able to take Ukraine and he did move on to a NATO country?
I think China has traditionally been very cautious. It's always been there for the longer game. It's not been as impetuous as Russia has historically. Clearly, that's changed under Xi. He's less patient. He's more confident. He's more assertive. Whether he would throw his lot in with Russia, I'm not sure, because I think, whichever way this goes, including if it does escalate to some extent, I see no good outcome for Putin. And I think that as much as China has invested in this relationship, and as important as this partnership is for China, I wonder whether they will recognize that by throwing their lot in with Putin, it's going to undermine a lot of the medium-term and longer-term plans that Xi has for his own role in the world, for his own strategic objectives. I mean, not least his ability to snatch Taiwan.
And so, I mean, it's sort of one of these things, he may recognize, and was something that Putin may not recognize, that he has not built the capacity to realize his dreams. I'm talking about Putin. So maybe Xi recognizes that. And he wants to help Russia because Russia creates opportunities for him, and it creates antagonism and problems in the West. But he doesn't want to see the Soviet Union recreated, because he doesn't want another center of power in Asia. So he wants sort of the Russia that exists maybe to the corporate boundaries of Ukraine, and as a problem child for the West. But he still wants China to be the dominant sole superpower in the world, the dominant country in the world. And so it seems to me he would only try to allow Putin and Russia to go so far.
I think that's right. I mean, this relationship between China and Russia is in many ways a marriage of convenience. It's opportunistic. I mean, it's no less dangerous for it. But their animosities run deep, as you point out, in Central Asia, in the Russian Far East. I mean, the Chinese are forever banging on about unequal treaties and historic grievance. And you sometimes overlook the fact that in the 19th century, under a series of treaties, the Russians grabbed huge swathes of the Far East and Central Asia off the dying Qing dynasty. And in Chinese textbooks, the Russians are as bigger villains when it comes to unequal treaties as the Brits. So the relationship is a complicated one. Russia is the junior partner, even more so now. And I think that it is useful for Xi to have China upsetting the international equilibrium, as indeed they would have done had this been a more competent operation and swifter operation in Ukraine. But you get close to that point where actually the damage for China is greater than the potential benefits of any messy victory that Putin could eventually claim to have achieved in Ukraine.
And with respect to the West, Will, one of the perhaps the benefits of this, I mean, and I don't mean to say this is a good thing, but one of the positive outcomes of something that is obviously a negative situation, this invasion, is that Western Europe is reconsidering the approach they've taken to their own defense, to their own energy independence. And you see some movements on those fronts from France and Germany in real time. That seems to me a positive. They're going to make themselves stronger, so they're not in such a compliant position against an aggressor, Putin or somebody else.
I think that's right. This has been an incredible wake-up call because there was always a tendency, you saw it in France, particularly in Germany, the argument that we need to engage with Russia and indeed with China, the same argument. German companies in particular, and of course other Western companies holding their noses and doing business in Russia, in China, deluding themselves that by doing so it will make those countries better places and that it will improve relations. But now that dependence has been exposed as an incredible vulnerability over Russia. And I think the wake-up call we're seeing will not be limited to Russia. I think there is an awareness that it's a very dangerous thing to make your economy too dependent on dictators who have grand historic visions of dominating, of rebuilding empire. And that implies equally to China as it does to Russia. And companies have more to lose should there be issues with China than they had even with Russia. But I think that this is a wake-up call, and countries, particularly in Europe, are becoming more aware that there are real dangers inherent in these economic dependencies.
He is Ian Williams, former foreign correspondent for BBC, Channel 4 News, and NBC, author of Every Breath You Take, China's New Tyranny. Apologies to Sting there. Every Breath You Take, China's New Tyranny is the book. Ian Williams, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This only